Part 87. Being a Bug in a Survival Game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 869. Sutinyu enjoyed flying in the volcano tunnel, and the time was shortened by half compared to when he arrived. In fact, it could be faster, but it was just because of the passage that limited Sutinyu's speed. By the time Sutinyu came out of the volcano, the sky had completely darkened. It's been so long. Sutinyu took out her phone and looked at the time. It was already 8 o'clock in the evening. Sutinyu clicked on a new text message. It was from Li Dun and had the hotel address on it. Sutinyu hurried over according to the address on the text message. After seeing Li Dun, Sutinyu settled his tip for today and sent him away. Sutinyu planned to rest for the night and leave the volcanic island early tomorrow morning to search for 4 divine objects. However, since the yin and yang continent is so big, Sutinyu doesn't know the specific location of the divine object yet, so he has to find out first. Sutinyu is currently in Jian continent, so he will first look for the divine objects here. The Jian continent is ruled by the royal family. Since Lucifer said that the divine objects are in the hands of those in power on the continent, the Jian royal family must have some kind of divine object in their hands. After eating and taking a shower in the hotel, Sutinyu searched online for information about members of the Jian royal family. The most powerful person in the Jian royal family is the queen, and the queen has 5 daughters and 7 sons. The queen is also a traditional Yin woman who favors girls over boys. None of the 7 princes are favored. Moreover, when they get older, they will be assigned by the queen to marry each other. It is impossible for the 7 princes to come into contact with divine objects. Among the other 5 princesses, 2 are underage, still little girls under 10 years old, and should not have access to divine objects. The adult princesses are, the eldest princess, the second princess, and the 5th princess. In addition, the second princess was also captured by the rebels. Then, Sutinyu can focus on, the queen, the 1st princess, and the 5th princess. How can we find out the whereabouts of the divine object as quickly as possible? Sutinyu muttered while looking at the photos of the 3 of them, holding her chin. At that time, you should be able to try hypnosis. Right? Hypnosis. When the time was approaching midnight, Sutinyu put down her phone and prepared to sleep. By the way, the royal family should also have special abilities, right? Thinking of this, Sutinyu hurriedly checked again. In the end, Sutinyu could only find out the specific abilities of the eldest princess. The abilities of the empress and the 5th princess were not revealed at all online. Seeing that he couldn't find it, Sutinyu had to give up. Sleep. The next day, Sutinyu got up early in the morning, had a simple breakfast, and then left the volcanic island by boat and headed for the capital of Jian continent. It would take another 2 hours to take the boat, so Sutinyu hid in a corner and searched for 4 magical objects. But no matter how Sutinyu changed the keywords, nothing about God appeared on the internet. And not even a single shadow of the 4 divine objects Lucifer mentioned could be seen. Sutinyu didn't feel surprised that he couldn't find it. Too long has passed since the era when gods ruled over humans. The grudges between gods and humans, with the imprisonment of the last god, have completely faded into history. Nowadays, the traces of God have been erased by time. However, Sutinyu also wanted to know more about the hidden plot involving the worldview. But on the surface, there are no gods in the yin and yang continent, and Lucifer at the bottom of the volcano doesn't look like a talkative god. The plots about gods that Sutinyu has obtained so far all come from underwater murals. He knows that the final result of the war between humans and gods is that humans win and replace the rule of gods. But why was God so powerful defeated by weak humans, and what was the specific process? What is the cycle of light and darkness? What does that mean? There were too many details, and Sutinyu was still confused. At the same time, A notice has been posted in front of the crater stating that the attraction will not be open in the near future. When Chu Xinyu came over again, she always felt something strange in her heart. It's better to go down and take a look, just a look. Chu Xinyu herself has not seen the legendary god. Apart from the mission, she also wants to see what the only remaining god in the world looks like. Chu Xinyu has the detailed route inside the volcano on hand, and there is no need to detour after entering. Despite this, it still took Chu Xinyu more than 2 hours to see that layer of magma. At this time, under the magma, Lucifer, who had closed his eyes to rest, suddenly opened his eyes. He turned his head and glanced upward. Then, a golden light flashed in his eyes. Several eagle monster corpses on the ground changed and actually recovered again. The recovered eagle monster is vivid and agile. Above, Chu Xinyu found a protruding rock, tied the rope to the rock, put the other end around her waist, and then calmly jumped off the magma. After his feet landed, Chu Xinyu looked around at the environment at the bottom of the volcano. The sealed god, the eagle monster that swallowed the god's snow melt. All of Chu Xinyu's attention was attracted by Lucifer. This is God. Chu Xinyu didn't shy away from anything, looking up and down the god's perfect body with burning eyes. Lucifer noticed Chu Xinyu's sticky gaze and frowned slightly. Tisk. Why do I feel like I'm being taken advantage of? Human, get out. Lucifer's mood plummeted, and he would naturally not look down upon Chu Xinyu, even though the other party might be another feather holder. After being imprisoned for tens of thousands of years, he seems to be in good spirits. Chu Xinyu knew that Lucifer had a seal on his body and could not pose any threat to him, so his words were a bit presumptuous and frivolous. Chu Xinyu even began to appreciate the vulture monster pecking at Lucifer's flesh bit by bit. Lucifer's face was calm, showing no emotion. But Lucifer had already determined that the strange woman in front of him was not a feather holder, but a native human. Boring. Lucifer immediately lost all interest, lowered his head slightly, closed his eyelids lightly, and continued to close his eyes to rest. Seeing that Lucifer ignored him, Chu Xinyu was about to take 2 steps forward, but when he caught sight of the seal from the corner of his eye, his steps stopped. Forget it, there is a seal, so you can't be too reckless. Chu Xinyu felt a little regretful. God! How perfect, if only. Just thinking about it made Chu Xinyu feel hot. After confirming the situation below, Chu Xinyu left the bottom of the volcano and walked out of the crater. After Chu Xinyu came out, the mobile phone had a signal. Sir, how is the situation over there? Chu Xinyu, everything is normal. Sir, if you have any instructions, please feel free to mention them. Chu Xinyu cut off the call and remembered that volcanic island seemed to be an island developing tourism. There should be a lot to do on that island. Thinking of this, Chu Xinyu made up her mind to relax and vent the evil fire she had just seen after watching the gods. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuan-Ke. Chapter 870. When he came, Sutingyu also took a boat and saw the sea views along the way. Now returning to Jiyan continent, Sutingyu was no longer interested in enjoying the sea view, so he hid in the cabin. Although the boat Sutingyu boarded was not very big, it was a sightseeing boat and each passenger was equipped with a small independent cabin. Sutingyu closed the door and stayed inside. Once the ship reaches a mainland port, she can leave. But the accident came very suddenly. Boom! A heavy crash sounded, and the entire hull shook twice. Sutingyu, who was sitting on the chair inside the cabin, was almost shaken off. This. Sutingyu was very confused. The sound insulation effect of the small cabin was not very good, and Sutingyu seemed to be able to vaguely hear the screams and panic of the passengers outside. Sutingyu immediately put all her belongings into the storage ring, and then walked out of the cabin door. As soon as the door opened, Sutingyu saw many passengers running around in panic. Sutingyu grabbed someone and asked about the situation. What's going on? What happened? Someone is hijacking the ship. The lady pulled by Sutingyu was undoubtedly a noble. Normally a very gloomy aristocratic person pays special attention to his own manners, but now, this man looked frightened and uneasy, with no grace at all, only a human desire to survive. Sutingyu let go of the man, who immediately ran away with his head in his hands. Ship hijacking? Are there pirates in this world? Sutingyu was a little curious and hurried in the opposite direction from where the people were fleeing. Sutingyu needed the ship to arrive at the Jian continent according to the normal sailing schedule. Now, if a small accident occurred, she would naturally not be able to ignore it. Bang! 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 As Sutingyu walked along, he heard the sound of weapons from time to time, and his face became slightly solemn. Pirates must have weapons in their hands. Extremian women have some special abilities. Although not all of them have offensive abilities, they are running away without any thought of resistance. It means that the pirates who robbed the ship, the weapon in his hand is unusual. As he rushed toward the cab, the number of fleeing people that Sutingyu could see became smaller and smaller, and he had a bad feeling in his heart. If it is a ship hijacking, it is premeditated. The ship's armed forces should be dismantled immediately, and then the bridge will be controlled. Finally, the crew will be captured and the entire ship will be controlled. If we turn another corner, we should reach the cab. Sutingyu thought to herself. Just as he was about to turn, a curly-haired woman walked towards him. Sutingyu glanced hastily and wanted to leave sideways, but at this moment, from the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of something that seemed to be holding in the woman's hand. A cold light flashed through her hand. Not good. Sutingyu's nerves tensed up instantly, and her body reacted as quickly as possible. The curly-haired woman who seemed to be escaping raised the weapon in her hand, pointed it at Sutingyu's heart, and pulled the trigger. Bang! Sutingyu dodged in time, and a short laser beam was fired from the mouth of the weapon, burning a small black hole in the shipboard behind him. With a weapon like this, it's impossible to be a passenger trying to escape. Sutingyu's eyes narrowed slightly. He realized that he had encountered a pirate who was hijacking the ship, so he stepped forward and struck decisively, hoping to seize the pirate's weapon first. The curly-haired woman noticed Sutingyu's intention and quickly took a few steps back, not forgetting to turn the weapon's nozzle. Sutingyu used the palm of his hand as a blade and struck the man's wrist holding the weapon with a knife. He only heard a sound of pain. The latter lost his aim and could not continue the attack. However, he held onto the weapon with his fingers and prevented it from falling. Land. When Sutingyu saw this, he quickly changed his offensive and grabbed the curly-haired woman's neck quickly and accurately with his other hand. Through a thin layer of scarf, Sutingyu's palm seemed to have touched something raised. Sutingyu flipped the person to the ground, holding down half of his body. Then, he had time to look at the curly-haired woman. It's you. Sutingyu recognized the woman in front of her. To be precise, she was actually a man. When the person who was restrained by Sutingyu saw Sutingyu's strange reaction, he couldn't help but take a serious look at the former. When he saw it, his face suddenly froze and turned from anger to joy. Benefactor. Why are you here? Here. When Sutingyu heard this title again, he raised his eyebrows slightly. This is what I want to ask you. Your current situation does not seem to be ideal, so why are you still hijacking ships with great fanfare? Sutingyu recognized the woman in front of him who looked surprised. Not just acquaintance, Sutingyu saw this face in the wanted notice on the website not long ago. One of the leaders of the Rose Rebels, Dennis. Sutingyu let go of him, and Dennis stood up and took 2 steps back. Instead of quarreling with the former, he held his fists in a respectful salute and said, "My benefactor, could you please move to talk?" Ken. Sutingyu superficially agreed to Dennis's request, but he was still a little defensive in his heart. After all, more than half a year has passed since the Rose Winery incident. Dennis is no longer the pet controlled by a woman. Although life is not easy for the rebels now, he is after all a powerful figure in one force. Sutingyu, on the other hand, can be said to be a loner in this world. Even if Dennis doesn't miss his old relationship, Sutingyu can't do anything. Dennis took Sutingyu to an unmanned cabin and locked the door. The former suddenly knelt on one knee in front of Sutingyu. Sutingyu was slightly startled and turned sideways to avoid the kneeling. "What are you doing? Get up quickly." Dennis shook his head. "My benefactor, although we say goodbye at Rose Winery, I still remember your kindness in my heart. You deserve this kneel. You should get up first. You have already thanked me at Rose Winery." Sutingyu helped Rongsu up. "I haven't done much to help you. The freedom you have now is yours to fight for." Came here. Sutingyu could probably understand Dennis's excitement. As early as the Yin-Yang City dungeon, Gucci was responsible for screening candidates for riots. If he has a cowardly nature and does not have the will to die, even if the option of regaining his freedom is placed in front of him, he will not dare to reach out for it, making it difficult to maintain his freedom. Although time is limited, the few riot leaders Gucci selected are much tougher than ordinary people in terms of their character, and they are not worthless wimps. Now it seems that at least they didn't pick the wrong person. After realizing that this is a real world, and that every move by players like Sutingyu and others may have an uncontrollable butterfly effect on the world, Sutingyu cannot just focus on leaving the copy world without caring about it. The fate of their copies of native humans was changed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Being a Bug in a Survival Game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 871. Sutingyu considered himself not a compassionate person, so if his own interests were involved, he would naturally not be able to compromise. But for matters other than profit, Sutingyu had no interest in becoming some cunning villain. After all, she is a little fairy. By the way, how are you doing now? Why do you want to hijack the ship now? This is also a sightseeing ship, so it shouldn't be of much use, right? Before they met, Sutingyu only regarded them as passers-by in life. Although he lamented their fate, he did not want to interfere anymore. However, now we meet again. The person was standing right in front of him, and Sutingyu couldn't ignore him completely. Dennis, that's right, because of Jian continent's natural suppression of men, our situation in the past 6 months has not been very good. Just half a month ago, we Darkthorns had planned to leave Jian continent and go to Jian continent. Yang continent. The two continents are separated by a strait, so we need enough ships and supplies. After hearing this, Sutingyu understood. Sutingyu raised his eyebrows. So, are you planning to seize enough ships first? Right. Because of the special characteristics of the two continents, the people in power on both continents have strict management on transoceanic tools such as ships. Except for military use, civilians are not allowed to build ships privately. The thought of seizing ships from the army was too dangerous and risky, so Dennis and others focused on sightseeing ships on surrounding islands. Their plan has just been implemented. They hijacked the ship each time, and the hostages on the ship were stripped of all external communication equipment and sent to a deserted and uninhabited island to be imprisoned. At present, there is no news. There is no other way. Jian continent has natural restrictions on men. Even if we rob a few arsenals and arm them, we can't erase the disparity in strength between men and women. Dennis smiled sadly on his face. With the continuous arrests of members of the Backstab, there have been some voices of opposition within the organization, and some people even want to surrender and go back to the old days of being treated as pets. Sutingyu glanced at Dennis's clenched hands and knew that the latter was extremely unwilling. There's no way. In order to eliminate the low-end gender opposition in the yin-yang continent, firstly, the yin-yang system has been solidified for tens of thousands of years, and secondly, this extreme gender opposition all comes from the curse of the gods and cannot be changed without human intervention. Sutingyu thought of Lucifer on the volcanic island. If the latter could break free from the seal, he wondered if the curse could be lifted. But let's not talk about whether Lucifer can lift the curse, but whether he wants to lift it or not is the difficulty. Sutingyu couldn't help Dennis and others, so he could only console him, when you go to Jiyang continent, you will be free and everything will be fine. I hope so. Dennis sighed slightly. Although the Jiyang continent respects men, the men on the Jiyang continent also look down on Jiyan men. When we get there, we can't risk exposing our identities. Don't talk about these bad things, benefactor. I am very happy to see you again. I don't know about other benefactors now. Sutingyu couldn't expose parallel paradise, so he made an excuse. They have something to do, so they should separate first. By the way, you are going to Jiyang continent. When will you arrive? Sutingyu will later go to Jiyang continent to collect divine objects. Although she can swim there by herself, it will be more convenient if there is a boat with a favorable wind. Dennis, it should be within the next month or two. Once we grab enough ships and supplies, we will sneak to Jiyang continent. Sutingyu estimated the time. 1 or 2 months should be enough for me to search for divine objects in Jiyang continent. Sutingyu asked, I also plan to go to Jiyang continent in the near future. Can you give me a ride? Hearing this, Dennis looked shocked. Benefactor, you are going to Jiyang continent, but Jiyang continent is very unfriendly to women. Dennis' tone was a bit tactful, but inside and outside his words, he didn't understand why Sutingyu wanted to go to Jiyang continent. If Sutingyu stayed in Jiyang continent for 7 days, his physique would be transformed. I have something very important. I have to go over there for a few days. It was late autumn now, and Sutingyu put on a coat. There was an inner pocket on the inside of the coat, and there was a feather in it. After Sutingyu accepted Lucifer's commission, she vaguely felt that she was no longer ostracized by this world. As for this feather, Sutingyu can borrow part of her power. In a short period of time, the curse of the gods will have no effect on her. Okay, seeing that Sutingyu had a plan, Dennis said no more, but, my benefactor, you may need some disguise. Dress up as a man. Inside the Dark Thorn, they are all men. Although Sutingyu was initially benevolent to the Dark Thorn, after more than half a year, a lot of new blood had flowed into the Dark Thorn, and those new members were not directly beholden to Sutingyu. If he appeared rashly in front of the members of the Dark Assassin, he would definitely cause a lot of trouble. In addition, Sutingyu wanted to go to Jiyang continent, and being a male was more convenient than being a female. Yes, Sutingyu nodded and took out his mobile phone. Let's exchange contact information first, and then contact me when you go to Jiyang continent. Okay, that's settled then. Taking a ride with Sutingyu was a piece of cake for Dennis. It's time for me to go. I want to go to the Jiyang continent. You should have taken control of the cab. Can you control the ship closer to the coast of the mainland? I can swim back. After the two exchanged pleasantries, Sutingyu was ready to leave. When Dennis and the others hijacked the ship, they were destined to completely disappear the ship on the vast sea. Sutingyu didn't ask to stop at the shore, she just wanted to get closer so that she could save some time. Dennis agreed, okay, I'll let someone do it. After Dennis went out, Sutingyu's attention returned to the outside. At this time, the panic of the boat passengers could no longer be heard outside, and it was estimated that they had been basically controlled. Sutingyu didn't go out. She found a place to sit down in the cabin and waited for Dennis. After a while, Dennis came back. Benefactor, you can go, just swim in the direction pointed by the stern of the boat. Dennis also took a waterproof bag on his shoulder to carry Sotingu's non-waterproof items. Sotingu had a storage ring, but she also accepted the waterproof bag and thanked Dennis for his kindness. As for the situation outside the cabin, Dennis has settled down. After Sotingu came out, he didn't meet anyone. Plop sound. Sotingu carried a waterproof bag and jumped straight into the sea. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 872. After Sotingu jumped into the water, he immediately put on the underwater booster belt. After she swam a certain distance, she suddenly remembered something and slapped her forehead. Dennis is also a native human. He should have asked about the gods just now. Although Sotingu didn't have much hope and felt that Dennis could know about that long history, it wouldn't hurt to ask. Forget it, when we meet again later, I'll take the time to ask. Thinking like this, Sotingu put the matter behind him and continued on his way. At this time, on board. After Dennis watched Sotingu's figure disappear little by little, he returned to the cab and ordered to change direction and return to their stronghold. They successfully obtained another ship and supplies, and the other members of the backstab on the ship were all in a happy mood. Dennis did not relax like the others. Instead, he stayed in a cabin and quietly thought about the development of the hidden sting today. The cabin door was ajar, and someone pushed it in. It was a middle-aged man with several hideous scars on his face, Dennis, the person who just left. When Dennis saw the visitor, he pointed to the empty chair next to him and motioned for the visitor to sit down. The middle-aged man's name is Parker. When he was young, because of his family's financial difficulties, he had no choice but to sell himself and became a plaything. Parker has had more than a dozen buyers, and one of them had unusual habits. She liked to whip her pets, and even used sharp blades to leave marks on their pets. The scar on Parker's face came from this. As a blessing and misfortune, Parker was disfigured. Most of the buyers no longer valued his beauty, but asked him to do some rough work. Although it was hard work, at least he didn't have to endure nausea to cater to the buyers' bed affairs. During the riots, Parker also stood up to respond, and then naturally joined the backstab. Because Parker had experience and talent in handling details such as housekeeping and logistics, Dennis trained the former as his confidant, specializing in managing logistics and housekeeping. Now that Sotingu has left, and Parker is someone Dennis trusts, he has no intention of continuing to hide it. He said truthfully, "She is my benefactor and the benefactor of the secret assassin." Dennis didn't say it outright, but the implications in his words were already obvious. That's it, Parker suddenly realized. Regarding the birth history of Darkthorn, those members who have not personally experienced the incident at Rose Winery have heard about it. They are a group of people whose origins are a mystery, including men and women. They helped several founders of Darkthorn and guided the birth of Darkthorn. Parker knew that Dennis hated extremely yin women because his twin brother was toyed to death by an aristocratic woman. If any woman appears in front of Dennis, the latter can remain calm and even respect them, only the mysterious people who gave Dennis a new life. "Dennis, that adult, why are you here?" After Parker entered the core of the Darkthorn, he also knew that several senior officials were trying to find the mysterious people who had helped the Darkthorn, but the strange thing was that those people seemed to have disappeared out of thin air, leaving no trace at all. Although Parker was grateful to those mysterious people from the bottom of his heart, half a year had passed, and those people had never appeared again during the difficult days of the secret sting, but now they suddenly appeared. It is difficult not to make people feel other thoughts. Maybe the benefactor is up to something. Dennis didn't have Parker's thoughts. He was directly involved in the Rose Winery riot. The latter might be suspicious of Sotingu's motives for showing up at this moment, but Dennis would not. People who have nothing to begin with and are in purgatory have nothing worth being plotted against. On the contrary, Dennis would be even more happy if Sotingu could ask for something from him. "Parker, We have almost enough ships on hand. The date to leave for Jiyang continent is set in 2 months. Parker was puzzled. Dennis, wasn't it originally scheduled for 1 month later? Why is it postponed for 1 month now? The longer you delay, the easier it is to cause trouble. Although the secret assassin has suffered a lot of blows, the total number of people in the organization now has reached tens of thousands. Otherwise, there is no need to bother to rob several ships. There were no outsiders here, and Parker was in charge of logistics. Dennis had to inform him sooner or later, so he said bluntly, "My benefactor will go to Jiyang continent after finishing his work in Jiyan continent. It just so happens that he can accompany us." She is going to Jiyang continent? Isn't she a woman? How can she want to go to Jiyang continent? Parker was stunned. Dennis shrugged, "I don't know, but there must be a reason why my benefactor did this. Let me calm down with you first. Don't spread this matter outside." Hearing this, Parker suppressed the shock on his face and nodded, "I know. By the way, Dennis, Dark Assassin is going to Jiyang continent. What should we do with the 2 Jiyan princesses and all the hostages?" Jean and the others are more inclined to execute them directly. Dennis frowned, "Let's keep it for now. We haven't left Jiyan continent yet. If we go too far, I'm afraid it will cause a lot of trouble." If it had been half a year ago, Dennis would have definitely killed the Yin woman who fell into his hands without hesitation to vent his anger. But now, Dennis thinks of those compatriots who were arrested. If possible, he would like to keep the second princess alive in exchange for the freedom and safety of several compatriots. Dennis had this idea, but it was so difficult to implement it that he didn't mention it to anyone, not even Parker. "Parker, yeah, that's what I thought too." Dennis lowered his head and stared at his hands. These hands, originally without any scars, were kept delicate and smooth. In just half a year, due to holding various weapons, some calluses grew up in the tiger's mouth and other places, making it look a lot rougher. And Dennis prefers his current hands, just. Dennis asked in a low voice, as if he was talking to Parker, but also as if he was asking himself, "Parker, do you think we can be truly free when we get to the extreme sun continent?" Parker was startled for a moment and sighed, "Maybe. Free." The 2 words are as light as a mountain. Due to the natural gender opposition, Jiyan continent has no room for rebellious men like Dennis. A delusional thought suddenly flashed through Parker's mind: how wonderful it would be if there was no such natural gender opposition. Parker remembered that when he was young, his father had led him to chant scriptures and pray on countless dark nights, making wishes to the gods and forgiving the world. Gods? Where can there be any gods in this world? Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuan-Ke. Chapter 873. Extremely Yin Continent. Shangjukan District, Donghuamen. Pay pass has arrived. 300 Liangzhu. After Su Tingyu paid the taxi balance, he opened the door and left the taxi. Su Tingyu glanced at the queue entering the city in front of Donghua Gate, and silently walked to the back of the queue. When they arrived at Su Tingyu, they paid the corresponding entry fee and the guards put Su Tingyu into the city. Finally, wherein Su Tingyu checked into a hotel, then went to a nearby laundromat. After paying for the laundry, she threw the clothes that had swam in the sea into the washing machine. It took about 40 minutes to wash clothes. Taking advantage of this time, Su Tingyu went to the restaurant opposite and ordered several signature dishes to reward himself. Shangjukan District is the administrative center of Jiyan Continent, and the ruling Jiyan royal family all live here. Su Tingyu swam from the sea to the shore and took several train rides before arriving in the city at dark. "Have you heard? There seems to be big news in the royal family recently." "What's going on?" "That is to say, it has been so many days since the second princess was kidnapped. It is estimated that even if she is rescued in the end, She may have been tortured by the brutal rebels until she became a human being. And among the remaining adult princesses, only the older one is left. The princess and the fifth princess. Also, I heard that His Majesty's health seems to be in some condition recently. SHH. Keep your voice down. In the lobby of the hotel, there were other guests dining. When Sutingyu heard the content of Jian royal family, his eyebrows moved slightly. This is Shangjukan district, which can be said to be at the foot of the emperor. News circulates quickly. If there is any news, there may be some signs. There is something wrong with the queen's health. Sutingyu thought to herself silently. If the queen is critically ill, the imperial power of the Jian royal family will have to undergo some changes. If there is a divine object within the Jian royal family, it should be handed over to the new heir to the queen. But the problem is how to freely enter and exit the palace. After all, the palace is heavily guarded. The most important thing is that the entire palace building is shrouded in an energy shield. You need to get a special jade slip to enter it. With the existence of the energy shield, Sutingyu couldn't force his way through. Even if he came into contact with the surface of the shield, his traces would be exposed immediately. Sutingyu quickly finished the meal he ordered, then left the restaurant and wandered around the city casually. Sutingyu had investigated and found that unless the jade slips that could enter the palace were given by members of the royal family, only high-ranking officials could possess them and enter the palace together as their family members. After the incident at Rose Winery, the second princess was arrested and has not been rescued to this day. The rest of the royal family also took a warning. They would not leave the palace at will no matter what the matter was. Even if they did, they would be accompanied by a large number of guards. There was no chance for Sutingyu to get close. Sutingyu came to Shangjukan district for the first time and wandered around the city until 12 o'clock before returning to the hotel to rest. Sutingyu was not in a hurry, but she didn't expect that she stayed there for 20 days and still couldn't find a way to enter the palace. However, Sutingyu was not without gains. Sutingyu pretended to be an out-of-town tourist and visited various restaurants and bars in the city. Among them, the Schwillen Hotel was famous far and wide and was also a good place to get information. One day, noon. Sutingyu came to Schwillen Hotel for dinner as usual. The environment, service, and dishes here were all first class. There were many customers every day, and reservations were required in advance. The only drawback was that it was a bit expensive. Sutingyu sat at the seat he had reserved and ordered a few of his usual dishes. There were many people in the hotel, and all kinds of voices were mixed. It seems that the young lady from the Su family who has been living in the country is coming back. What country girl? Which Su family? What other Su family could it be? It's the Su family of Director Su of the Bureau of Rights and Music. Then what's going on with this country girl? I've met several young ladies from the Su family, and they've been staying in Shangjukan. Harm, you don't know this. Sutingyu listened to some guests discussing gossip about the Su family, with a hint of interest in her eyes. From the conversations between those guests, Sutingyu almost understood the cause and effect. There was a young lady in the Su family who had been frail and sick since she was a child, and her destiny was in conflict with the rest of the Su family. Therefore, the young lady was sent to live in the countryside. More than 10 years later, she has grown up safely. Recently, the Su family has been and planned to take the person back. Do you think the Su family is bringing back the unmarried young lady at this time for the royal banquet in a week? Maybe it's true. Among the adult princes, 3 are not married. The head of the Su family, Suzayaking, is also the head of the bureau. It's possible that he doesn't want his daughter to marry a prince. Sutingyu silently listened to the analysis of the guests. The consumption of Schwillen Hotel is very high, and the people who can come here to spend money are either rich or expensive. The news spread among this group of people is more credible. He came from the countryside, and has the opportunity to enter the palace. Sutingyu thought to himself, and a bold idea suddenly came to his mind. She can pretend to be a Miss Su family, enter the palace on the day of the banquet, and then search for divine objects. The young lady from the Su family has left home since she was a child, so her relatives must not know much about her temperament, which can greatly reduce the risk of exposure. Sutingyu still had a few bottles of disguise potions on hand, which should be enough if they were only used on the day of the banquet. The only key now is how to contact the Miss Su family and how to find the right time to replace her. After finishing lunch, Sutingyu did not stay any longer, but hurriedly went to find out about the Miss Su family. When he learned that the Miss Su family had not entered the city yet, he immediately rushed to the city gate. Because the Miss Su family was going home, and the place where she lived before was exposed, there were several city gates in the Shangjukan district. Sutingyu judged from the place where the former lived that the Miss Su family would enter through the Ziwa gate when she returned. So he went over and waited. A certain small town. In front of a hotel. "Miss, we will be arriving in Shangjukan district soon." "Yes, miss, please bear with me." Outside the door, there were 3 luxury cars parked, and several strong women carried large and small bags of luggage and loaded them into the cars. On the edge of the car, there was a young woman in her 20s covering her mouth and nose with a pale face. She was surrounded by 2 or 3 older women, all offering comfort to those who dared not get in the car because of motion sickness. "Young woman. I'm feeling better, let's go." After loading their luggage, several people got in the car one after another, and the 3 luxury cars started and left the hotel door. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Being a Bug in a Survival Game. Author, Kuan-K. Chapter 874. Sutingyu stood guard at the city gate for several hours. When he got tired from standing at first, he found a nearby dessert shop, went in, ordered a dessert, and sat on the roadside to wait. 1 hour. 2 hours. 3 hours. There were countless vehicles passing by on the concrete road. Sutingyu would pay attention to the license plate number of each vehicle passing by. As aristocrats in Shangjukan district, the Su family has an iconic license plate number, with S added at the end of the license plate to show their status. Wait and wait. Suting looked at the sky getting darker with fish eyes, and the dessert shop also turned on the lights and continued to operate. Whizzing. A series of car sounds sounded again. Sutingyu held her new dessert and glanced at it casually, and this glance immediately made her excited. 1, 2, 3, all vehicles with the Su family logo. This may be the car that picks up Miss Su's family. Sutingyu took a few bites of the dessert and stood up immediately. After waiting for such a long time, Sutingyu also figured out the location of the Su family. So Sutingyu took a shortcut, put on an invisible hat and used his invisibility ability in a deserted corner. When Sutingyu ran out of the crowded street, the pedestrians passing by felt a gust of wind blowing past them, but there was no sign of anyone. Sutingyu estimated the time and waited by a road. After waiting for a long time, the 3 cars of the Su family came from a distance. Sutingyu narrowed his eyes slightly and kept approaching the 3 driving cars. After reaching a suitable distance, Sutingyu jumped up. When her feet were about to touch the roof of the car, she immediately activated the ability to transform the emerald, turning herself into an invisible kitten. She landed lightly and silently on the roof of the car, and then, using the grip of her paws, she scratched. He stayed on the roof of the car to prevent his small body from being thrown out. Sutingyu got into the car. The people in the car were unaware. Phew. Sutingyu breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. On the next journey to Su's house, Sutingyu lay on the roof of the car and watched 3 cars parked in front of Su's house. After a while, the door of Su's house was opened, and the car started again and drove slowly. Enter the Su family. When they arrived at the Su's house, Sotingyu did not move around, but observed the people getting out of the car, trying to determine which one was the Miss Su's. Sotingyu wanted to know, and it was very simple. There was a young woman who was respectfully called Miss by others, and it was most likely her. When Sotingyu saw the woman leaving, she jumped out of the car and followed the woman secretly. The young lady from the Su family who came back was named Sume. After several days of hard work, the vain Sume could not bear it. As soon as she returned to the Su family, she went straight to her room to rest first. And Sotingyu naturally followed. Relying on his current invisibility, Sotingyu walked around Sume's room in an open and above-board manner, and then began to look for a secret place where he could hide his body. Did Chunfeng take leave and go back to his hometown? Yeah, I just left yesterday. I borrowed her things a few days ago, forget it, wait until she comes back. Sotingyu wandered to a servant's living building and heard the conversation between two servants. One of the servants originally wanted to open a room, but gave up after knowing that the master was not there. Sotingyu smiled playfully, yes, there should be an empty room here. Not only do you have to look for empty rooms, but you also have to look for ones that no one is paying attention to. Finally, Sotingyu found an empty servant's room. The original servant had just resigned, so the place was empty and no one had moved in yet. After finding a place to stay, Sotingyu took advantage of the invisibility period and ran back to Sume. After all, he was going to impersonate the other person on the day of the royal banquet, and now he had to get familiar with it first. Ever since, Sotingyu began to live a life of lurking in the Su family. After the invisible hat and the deformed emerald had cooled down, they used their abilities to quietly approach Sume. After the ability ended, Sotingyu hid in the hiding place he chose, surfing the internet on his mobile phone, and checking the Su family's interpersonal relationships. There is a lot of bread and mineral water in Sotingyu's inventory, so he won't starve to death, but he can't bathe every day. If it's too frequent, his secret will be revealed, and he has to choose it in the dead of night. Sotingyu waited and waited. Finally, the day of the royal banquet arrived. The banquet officially starts at 7 o'clock in the evening, and as an invited guest, you need to arrive half an hour in advance. Sotingyu estimated that time was almost up in the hiding spot, so she used the power of the emerald. After a second, she turned into a palm-sized bird, flew to Sume's room with her small wings puling. Window. Miss, this is tonight's dress. Miss, let me put on your makeup. Sotingyu, who had just arrived, saw that Sume was being manipulated by the servants like a rag doll, and immediately stood obediently on the window sill. Anyway, the disguise potion can perfectly replicate makeup and clothing, so she doesn't have to suffer in a hurry. Okay, you can go out first. After the servants finished everything, Sume waved her hand impatiently, signaling for the others to go out first. Sume held her breath in her heart. Isn't it just to marry a prince? He is a man after all, and I don't know why my mother pays so much attention to it. Sume has the typical female chauvinism of Jian continent, and it is normal not to accept it. Seeing that Sume was the only one left in the room, Sotingyu was overjoyed. What a great opportunity. Sotingyu flew into the room, because Sume was carrying Sotingyu on her back. Sotingyu immediately recovered his body after landing. When Sume noticed something was wrong, Sotingyu quickly knocked the person unconscious with a knife. Then, Sotingyu fed Sume a bottle of intermediate coma potion, which can make the user comatose for 3 to 6 hours. The specific time to wake up varies from person to person, but the minimum is 3 hours, which is enough for Sotingyu to take over. Sume went to the banquet to look for the artifact. Sorry, you should have a good sleep first, Sotingyu muttered to the unconscious Sume, while dragging the person to the closet, then opened the closet, stuffed the person in, and finally closed the closet door. After doing this, Sutingyu took out a bottle of disguise potion from the storage ring and drank it. Under Sutingyu's control, she became Sume. After that, Sutingyu waited obediently for the Su family to pick him up, then got into the Su family's car and headed to the palace for the banquet. The Su family is a noble family with luxuriant branches. Among the young unmarried women attending the banquet, in addition to Sume, there are 3 members of the branch. Of course, Sume's target is the prince, and a few people from the side are here to join in the fun and show their faces. They cannot marry the prince, but they can also marry the sons of other powerful people to help the Su family. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 875. Everything is going smooth. However, Sutingyu did not expect that Sume would ride in the same car as Suzayaking, the leader of the Su family. Then, Sutingyu listened to the teaching along the way. Remember, behave better and try to marry a prince. Yes, Mother Sutingyu agreed obediently, but silently cursed in her heart. A woman marrying a man, well, that's exciting. However, Sutingyu knew that he was only borrowing his identity temporarily, and no matter how exciting it was, it had nothing to do with him. Sutingyu didn't take the initiative to talk, and Suzayaking was the one making a lot of noise. When Suzayaking had finished speaking, Sutingyu nodded in agreement. Sutingyu had observed the relationship between Sume and Suzayaking these days. Maybe they had been separated for many years and the mother and daughter were not close. However, Sume agreed with everything Suzayaking said without losing her temper. When they arrived at the entrance of the palace, Suzayaking opened the door, got out of the car, and handed the jade slip representing her identity to the guard for inspection. After the inspection was correct, all the Su family members got out of the car. Several Su family members were able to go in, but the accompanying servants and driver could only wait outside. Sutingyu followed Suzayaking and walked into the palace together. This is the palace. There are many people. That one seems to be the second young lady of the Wu cabinet family. Sutingyu only wanted to reduce his presence due to identity issues. Although he was also looking at the palace, he did not make a sound. And some of the Su family sisters who were traveling with him, some of whom had never entered the palace, were discussing with each other excitedly at this moment. Sutingyu pretended to be Sume, who was not familiar with them, so she didn't want to socialize with them. When Sutingyu was wondering when he could act alone, he heard Suzayaking, who was leading the way, say, "You all go for a walk. If you hear the bell, remember to return to the banquet hall." Sutingyu was overjoyed. "Yes. Okay, master." Sutingyu was about to leave, but Suzayaking patted her shoulder and said in a meaningful tone, "Remember what I just said in the car. In addition, you can go and see Clark's garden. There are several exotic flowers in bloom in full bloom." Clear. Sutingyu did not find the specific layout map of the palace on the internet. However, during the time she was lurking in the Su family, she borrowed Sume's hand and saw some of the palace maps that Suzayaking secretly compiled. Her original intention was to prevent Sume from getting lost. Clark's garden is a large garden in the palace that connects the front hall and the back right hall. Then the right hall is the residence of the princes. Go ahead. Over the past few days, Sume had behaved obediently and honestly. Suzayaking felt less worried and let her go with satisfaction. Sutingyu, who was allowed to move freely, immediately started shopping around. In the middle of the journey, Sutingyu went to the toilet, took out the fallen angel's feather and hid it under his coat. This feather belonged to a fallen angel. The palace was so big, Sutingyu hoped that the feather could sense something and guide her to find the divine object. The activity area of the banquet is restricted, and the queen will also appear when it officially starts. Sutingyu's first target location was the Gakifa Palace where the queen worked and lived, which was not an area where banquets were allowed. When they were almost close to the Gakifa Palace, Sutingyu found a deserted corner, put on an invisible hat, and then sneaked into the Gakifa Palace. Gokov Palace. When Sutingyu entered the palace, he encountered some patrolling guards and maids from time to time, but he carefully avoided them. Where are the queen's office and bedroom? The palace was so big that Sutingyu didn't know where to go for a while. So, Sutingyu thought that there was strength in numbers, so he called out the residents of the Angel Stone tablet. First, he showed them the picture of the queen on the mobile phone network, and then ordered, "Call me if you find someone. Be careful and don't be seen." The residents nodded and dispersed. "There's nothing here, there's nothing here either." Sutingyu didn't want to wait and went to look for it himself. After a while, a resident came back to look for Sutingyu. "I heard a maid call queen." Sutingyu's eyes lit up, "Take me there quickly." In a palace room. The palace door was ajar, and Sutingyu secretly looked inside through the gap in the door. Inside is a large room with a very luxurious layout and decorated with various rare treasures. Inside, a woman wearing a maid uniform stood respectfully in front of another person. The man was dressed in fine clothes and had a crown on his head that symbolized power. "Your Majesty the Queen, most of the guests are here." "Oh, I see." Sutingyu sneaked in and hid in the corner, looking at the extremely young queen curiously. Tisk tisk. So young? According to the information Sutingyu searched on the internet, the empress seemed to be hundreds of years old, but she did not have enough children. The dozen or so princesses before her were either stillborn or died halfway, and their rankings were wiped out. Today's eldest princess is not actually the queen's first daughter. In the photos posted online, the queen looks like a mature woman in her 20s and 30s, but the eldest princess is middle-aged and has some wrinkles. If someone who doesn't know the truth sees the mother and daughter, they will definitely guess wrong. The relationship between the two people. For such a young queen, I feel like it won't be a problem to survive a dozen more princesses, Sutingyu complained silently in her heart. After the maid left, the queen opened the inner door and walked in. Sutingyu thought about waiting for the queen to leave before going in to search. But at this moment, Sutingyu felt that her body was getting slightly hot. She lowered her head and saw, it was feathers, and the feathers were responding. There was no one here, so Sutingyu took out the feathers. The light feathers, shining with mysterious blood, floated in the air again. But this time, it didn't fly away automatically. The queen just entered the inner room. Sutingyu thought for a few seconds and decided to enter the inner room. Now that feather has reacted, let's go over and have a look. But when Sutingyu came in, he found the queen standing blankly in front of a mirror. The height of the mirror was almost as high as the beams, as if it were completely embedded in the wall. The width of the mirror could allow 3 or 4 people to cover their bodies at the same time. Into the mirror. Mirror. That is. Although Sutingyu was invisible, she didn't dare to get too close, so she couldn't clearly see the expression on the queen's face at this time. At this time, a clear and thick bell sounded. Sutingyu's expression was slightly startled. The bell is ringing, the party is about to begin. The queen in front of the mirror made some movement. She straightened her appearance in front of the mirror, turned around and left. Creak. Suting watched the palace door close with fishy eyes, then immediately slipped to the window, used the ability to transform the emerald, turned into a bird, and flew above the palace door. Wait and wait. After Sutingyu saw the queen's figure, it seemed that the latter was going to the banquet hall, so she immediately flew back and released her invisibility and transformation abilities. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 876. The queen just wanted to look in the mirror, Sutingyu came to the mirror and looked at it with her eyes. Huh. Sutingyu was surprised to find that the mirror could not reflect his own appearance, which was as calm as ever. Can't look at people? Then why does the queen have such a big mirror? Sutingyu touched her nose, full of curiosity. Suddenly, the feather in Sotingu's hand flew out and hit the mirror. In an instant, the feather actually melted into the mirror. Where are my feathers? Sotingu pressed his hands on the mirror, looking anxious. But the mirror surface is flat, without any convexity or concavity. Depend on. Where are my feathers? Just when Sotingu was looking for feathers, a slight fluctuation suddenly appeared on the empty mirror. A blurry image slowly emerged from light to dark. When Sotingu saw the reflection in the mirror clearly, he was so frightened that he took several steps back, his eyes widening. Whoa! Lucifer! Why is Lucifer here? Sotingu turned around suddenly. There was no one behind him, but the image in the mirror, whether it was body shape, eyebrows, face, it was indeed Lucifer. Sotingu calmed down, looked carefully, and called tentatively, Lucifer. But as soon as the words came out, Sotingu couldn't help but cover his face. Ah! How stupid! How could Lucifer appear in the mirror when he was trapped on a volcanic island? But Sotingu stretched out a finger and poked at the image in the mirror curiously. Hiss! Sotingu felt a pain in her fingertips. When she looked down, she found a cut on her fingertips, and bright red blood beads flowed out of the wound. Sotingu quickly put the injured finger into his mouth and said, well. The blood drops suddenly stopped when they were less than a foot away from the ground. Then, it gradually evaporated away, as if it had been absorbed by something, and disappeared without a trace. At the same time, thousands of miles away, beneath the bottom of a sleeping, lifeless volcano, on the dark cross, the beautiful god was bound by heavy chains, unable to move at all. The god closed his eyes and took a deep breath. No movement of breath could be seen on his white jade chest, which was like a dead sculpture. Suddenly, the god opened his pure golden eyes, and the brilliance in his eyes was flowing, shining with some kind of extraordinary brilliance. The god slowly lowered his head and stared at his empty and damaged heart. The heart that had been silent for tens of thousands of years suddenly felt a faint warmth. A daze flashed across the god's eyes, it moved. Subconsciously, the god wanted to reach out and touch his heart, but the next second, the chains all over his body immediately restricted his movements, and he woke up instantly. Finally, the god looked at his heart. There is no heart. Gone. Jian Palace, inside Gakofa Palace. Sotingu didn't notice this strange thing. She held her finger in her mouth for half a minute. When she felt that it stopped bleeding, she put her hand down. It's strange, why was my hand suddenly cut? Sotingu couldn't understand. Whoosh! When Sotingu was confused, suddenly, the mirror reacted again, and the missing feather flew out of the mirror. Huh? Are you back again? Sotingu was about to reach out to pick it up. At this time, the image on the mirror changed. From Lucifer, it slowly turned into a ball of light the size of a fist, and then seeped out from inside the mirror little by little. Sotingu looked curiously at the large firefly in front of her, and when she couldn't help but want to reach out and poke it, she suddenly remembered that her fingertips had just been scratched, and she immediately retracted her little claws with a puffed face. But Sotingu didn't reach out to touch it, but the light ball was guided by the feathers and approached Sotingu, and even rubbed her injured fingertips in a very humane way. The next second, the wound on the fingertip healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. This. Sotingu blinked his big eyes. Sotingu always felt that this mysterious little ball of light was trying to please him, but there was no evidence. However, the small ball of light helped him heal his wound, and Sotingu boldly stretched out his hand and took the small ball of light. Seeing Sotingu reach out, the small ball of light spun twice, as if it was jumping for joy, and then it fell neatly into Sotingu's hand. At this time, Sotingu's panel popped up. Main mission, looking for angel heart, completed. Wow! Is this the heart of an angel? Sutinyu gently fiddled with the small ball of light with the fingers of his other hand, his eyes full of surprise. The small ball of light was glowing, and Sutinyu couldn't see what it looked like. However, the feeling after getting it is that it is an irregular solid body. An angel's heart, is this what it looks like? Wait, this is the heart of an angel. Lucifer asked me to find it? Sutinyu's eyes widened, isn't this the heart of Lucifer? Wow, without the heart, he can still, alive. Sutinyu thought of Lucifer's angel status, well, she had never been in contact with an angel before. Maybe she could really survive? After Sutinyu poked for a while, he was ready to take the little ball of light back. Sutinyu tried it. After all, it was a mission item and could be stored in the inventory. I got one of the 4 divine items, Sutinyu clenched his little paw, full of motivation. I don't know if there are any other divine objects in the Jian royal family. Sutinyu speculated while holding the feather and circling around the room, hoping for another reaction from the feather. Ballroom. The queen had just finished her speech, with a gentle face, everyone, enjoy yourself. The queen raised her wine glass, clinked it with the guests present from a distance, then took a sip of the wine in the glass and put it back on the tray in the hand of the maid. With the queen's presence, the atmosphere of the banquet became even better. Her Royal Highness the Queen is as graceful and outstanding as ever. That's right, Her Royal Highness the Queen is really good at taking care of herself. She looks younger than me. Her Royal Highness the Queen's grace is really like the bright moon in the sky. The Queen appeared for a moment and then left. In the side hall, a maid came in to announce the news, Her Royal Highness the Queen, the first assistant wishes to see you. Xian. After the maid left, the Queen habitually took out her small mirror and admired her still youthful face. Suddenly, the Queen's expression changed drastically. She moved closer to the mirror and stared at the wrinkles in the corners of her eyes. How could, obviously. Not only are there 1 or 2 wrinkles, but the young face in the mirror is gradually becoming a bit older at a speed visible to the naked eye. Snapped. The Queen smashed the mirror and suppressed the anger in her heart. After the anger passed, an indescribable fear surged into his heart. The Queen stood up immediately and wanted to rush back to the palace as soon as possible. Sutinyu turned into a little bird and spun around the Gakifa palace several times, but its feathers didn't react at all. In desperation, Sutinyu had no choice but to change back into human form. Is there only one divine object in the Jian palace? The palace is so big, you can also look for it elsewhere. After making up his mind, Sutinyu left Gakifa palace. Your Highness. Your Highness. Sutinyu was walking on the path. From a distance, he saw the Queen who was supposed to be at the banquet, rushing over. The maids and guards who met on the road stopped and saluted when they saw the Queen. Sutinyu glanced at it, then at the feathers in the inventory. No response. There should be no divine objects left on the Queen. Moreover, the Queen's hands were empty and she did not carry any mysterious accessories around her waist. The 3 subsequent divine objects were easy to tell by their names and difficult to hide. Sutinyu looked away. She was taking another path and would not meet the Queen. Now, let's seize the opportunity and try to visit all the places in the palace. Sutinyu first went to some areas that were inaccessible to guests. For convenience, Sutinyu turned into a bird and flew low over every building. No response, no response. First lap. No response. During Sutinyu's second lap, he flew lower and flew between various buildings. No response. While Sutinyu was diligently looking for the divine object, the Queen returned to the palace and immediately checked the mirror embedded in the wall. The Queen stood steadily in front of the mirror. After a while, she picked up another small mirror to observe her current appearance. The wrinkles are still there. I actually have gray hair. My skin tone has become darker. The Queen was so angry that she broke several mirrors. How is it possible? How could it be completely useless, impossible? The crown on the queen's head was a little crooked, but she, who always paid attention to her manners, had no intention of doing anything about her manners at this moment. All the way back, the fear suppressing my heart became more and more intense. Isn't it useless? The queen tapped her fingers on the mirror several times regularly. A gap suddenly appeared on the originally smooth mirror surface, and then, a square small hole was exposed in front of the queen's eyes, but there was nothing inside. The queen looked hard. Someone is coming. Front hall, banquet hall. Sutinyu returned to his human form and stood outside the door of the banquet hall. The music and human voices coming from the hall were mixed with each other, and Sutinyu looked depressed. Isn't this really the only one? The other three are all in Jiyang continent. Seeing that the date agreed with Dennis was coming, Sutinyu would stay for another month at most before setting off for Jiyang continent. If you wait too long, it will be difficult for Dennis to do anything. After all, he cannot lead the current secret stab alone. At most, it will delay some time. Tonight, if there is no second harvest in the palace, Sutinyu will prepare to go to various famous cities in Jiyang continent, one place after another. If I really couldn't find it, I went to Jiyang continent. Master Chief, I haven't seen you for a long time. The last time we met was at Master Chief Assistant. It is my honor to have the honor to meet you. Your Majesty, the Chief Assistant, is so busy. Why are you free today? When Sutinyu was about to enter the banquet hall, a group of people walked out of the hall, and those people seemed to be centered on one of the silver-haired women. I saw that the silver-haired woman was dressed in white, without too many other cumbersome accessories, and her face was cold, like an immortal who had accidentally fallen into the mortal world. The silver-haired woman held an exquisitely crafted silver-white scepter in her hand. The height of the scepter was even much higher than the person holding the scepter. This scepter, is this the current chief assistant of Jiyang? Sutinyu watched from a distance. In addition to the queen, Sutinyu also knew other high-ranking Jiyang officials. Among them, the chief assistant of Jiyang can be said to be below one person and above 10,000 people in Jiyang continent. The scepter in his hand is the status symbol of every chief assistant of Jiyang. It is said that he never leaves his body, even if he is resting. Keep it with you and don't rely on others. Tisk, tisk, she must be surrounded by officials who want to curry favor with the chief minister. Sutinyu remembered that when she stayed at Su's house, she often heard SurvivalGame mention the chief assistant in private. Even because the first assistant had an only son, SurvivalGame also hinted to Sume that if she couldn't marry the prince, she could settle for the next best thing and marry the first assistant's only son. As for the only son being a fool or something. Tisk tisk. What does this have to do with her, Sutinyu? Sutinyu watched the show for a while and then prepared to enter the banquet hall. The chief assistant and his group stopped directly in the open space outside the hall. Everyone except the chief assistant was chattering away. Sutinyu walked past the group of chief assistants, and she could still hear the harassed chief assistants responding in a good-tempered way. It's been a long time since we saw you, Mr. Liu is still as charming as ever. I have nothing to do today, so I came over to join in the fun. My son doesn't like fun, so he won't come here. The next second, Sutinyu's footsteps suddenly stopped. In the inventory, Feather, which had been quiet for a long time, reacted again, and even felt like he couldn't wait to rush out. Sutinyu suppressed this impulse and her brain was working rapidly. Divine object. The second fetish is nearby. Sutinyu turned around sharply and his eyes fell on the scepter in the chief assistant's hand. The angel's staff, the scepter, the status symbol of each generation's first assistant. This scepter is not a personal item. Sutinyu suppressed the excitement in her heart and regained her composure to think. The chief assistant's scepter may be the sacred object angel's staff, but it must be obtained. The chief assistant was too cautious and precious about the scepter. For a while, Sutingyu couldn't think of any better way besides grabbing it by force. However, now that we know that the scepter is in the hands of the chief assistant, and besides daily work, the chief assistant usually leaves the palace, there is no rush now. Anyway, the chief assistant has a residence in Shangjukan district and cannot escape. After Sutingyu finally entered the palace, he had to search the entire palace first to make sure that no corner was missed, so as not to miss the sacred objects. So, Sutingyu left the place and entered the banquet hall. First, go and show your face to SurvivalGame. Where did you go? Sutingyu came back, and as expected, SurvivalGame asked questions. Sutingyu answered honestly, I went to the garden and stayed there for a long time, but I didn't see anyone. You, His Royal Highness just showed up, you, forget it. Sukingzia looked disappointed, but at first, she didn't have much hope for this country girl, and waved her hand, there's nothing wrong now, you walk around. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 877. Tap 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 tap. At this time, groups of guards broke in outside the hall. Among them, the leader of the guards looked at the guests who were confused and said loudly. The queen ordered that the palace was stolen and a thief was suspected of breaking in. Everyone should stay put. For a moment, the relaxed and soothing atmosphere was broken. Is there a thief? It can't be the fault of the rebels. This thief is too bold and dares to steal on the queen's head. The guests could not move around freely, so they could only talk with the people nearby. Sutingyu hid in the corner, watching this scene, and couldn't help but guess in her mind, did I steal the angel's heart and was discovered? This is a bit troublesome. Sutingyu thought she could wait until the banquet was over before being discovered. By then, she would have left the palace and even left Shangjukan district. When the queen came back, she didn't just go back to her bedroom and found out, right? Tisk tisk. This luck. Sutingyu glanced at the clock hanging in the hall, a trace of regret flashed in her eyes. If she had found out half an hour later that the banquet was over, she could have slipped away. And now? Please stretch out your hands, don't move, let us check. A guard came to Sutingyu, his tone was relatively polite. Sutingyu honestly stretched out his hands, but found them empty. The dress Sutingyu wore was not a very complicated dress. From the outside, it looked like there was no place to hide anything. After checking Sutingyu, the guard moved away to check the next person. Gokov Palace. The first assistant hurried over from the banquet hall. Your Highness, what happened? The queen looked gloomy. That thing is missing. What? The chief assistant glanced at the queen's wrinkled face, and suddenly his expression changed. Did you lose it? Damn it! How come? The chief assistant, who had always been calm and self-possessed, was livid with anger at the news. He looked into the queen's eyes with no respect at all and even a bit of anger. It must still be in the palace, the queen slammed the table angrily, as long as we find the thief. We will definitely get the things back. The chief assistant's face was extremely cold. What if we can't find the thief? Can you sneak into the palace without alerting everyone, and avoid the eyes and ears of the guards? Can such a thief really be found out so easily? The queen's breath was slightly suffocated and she was unable to answer. The chief assistant regained some composure and asked in a cold voice, has anything else been stolen from your palace? The queen shook her head. That's it, the belongings in the palace are intact, and there are no obvious signs of being rummaged through. Hearing this, the chief assistant frowned. This is very strange. Not asking for money, just stealing things like that. This was planned and prepared. And the Gekova Palace is so big. If I want to find something, I haven't even rummaged through it. Could it be that the thief knew where the items were hidden beforehand? At this time, a captain of the guard came to the Queen and said respectfully, "Back to your Highness, I haven't found the items you mentioned yet." After saying that, the head guard looked embarrassed. The Queen asked them to find something, but the former was vague about the specific appearance of the thing and refused to tell them. This undoubtedly made the search more difficult. The captain of the guard had a hard time saying this. If the Queen punished him for not doing things well, he would have no choice but to grit his teeth and accept it. Queen, among the guests, first exclude those who stayed in the palace banquet hall from the beginning, and let those people leave the palace first. And those who left during the banquet, investigate their movements. And all the maids and guards on duty in the palace will also be checked. The captain of the guard took the order, "Your Highness, I will do it right away." After the guards retreated, the Queen turned to look at the chief assistant. "That thing is very important and cannot be lost." "You." The Queen's voice paused, her eyes moved away slightly, and fell on the scepter in the hands of the chief assistant. The chief assistant noticed the Queen's gaze and snorted coldly, "A prediction, do you know how much effort it takes on me?" The Queen immediately stood up, suddenly bowed slightly to the chief minister, and saluted, "Sister, I implore you to take action once." The chief assistant looked startled. How long, hadn't she heard such a title again? No one in Jian continent knows that the current Queen and chief minister are actually twin sisters. In the royal family of Jian continent, the birth of twins, especially if both children are female, is regarded as an ominous omen and a great disaster for the country. During the reign of the previous queen, a pair of twins were born. At that time, the royal family claimed that only one princess was born, who is now the queen, while the other princess was sent out of the palace, hid her identity, and changed her appearance to become the old queen at that time. The personal disciple of the first assistant. The two divine objects owned by the Jian royal family were both passed down to the queen, and the same to the chief minister. As for the prophecy technique practiced in the first minor, by borrowing the power of the angel rod, one can get twice the result with half the effort and greatly reduce the sequelae of the prophecy technique. "Okay, even if you don't speak, I will make a prediction." The chief assistant waved his hand and motioned for the Queen to sit down again. The thief came for the divine object, and now, the only divine object of the Jian royal family, all that's left is the scepter in my hand. If I don't take precautions, maybe. The Queen's eyes were stern. Is it possible that the thief would dare to steal a second time? That's not certain, the chief assistant snorted coldly. In addition, the origin of the thief, if it is from the Jiang continent, it would be fine. In a sense, they are in the same camp. I am afraid of the thief this time. It's the remnants of evil that are causing trouble. Sister Huang means. The chief assistant shook his head slightly. We haven't found out yet, but as long as we catch the thief and torture him severely, we will definitely find out who is behind it. Okay, I'm going to start making predictions. Don't let anyone come in and disturb me. Okay, Sister Huang. Ballroom. All the guests were checked, and nothing unusual was found. These are extremely sinister dignitaries and family members. The Queen does not dare to neglect them without complete evidence of guilt. Nowadays, although guests cannot leave the palace at will, they do not restrict their freedom of movement in the front hall. Sutingyu took the opportunity to go to the toilet. If you find an opportunity to escape quickly, staying like this is not an option. Moreover, I was not in the banquet hall during the trip. This kind of thing will be discovered after careful investigation. Sutingyu looked at the unfamiliar face in the mirror. Suddenly, an idea popped out. I can change my identity. Change to an identity that has no time to commit the crime from beginning to end. But who to choose? Sutingyu was struggling when a not unfamiliar voice came from behind. But I'm so suffocated. When can I go back, Mayor? Are you here too? Sutingyu turned around and saw his cheap mother Suzayaking. Sutingyu immediately said, "Hello, mother." "I didn't even see him come out." Suzayaking glanced at Sutingyu and then found a pit. Sutingyu's eyes rolled around and fell on the door panel of the toilet cubicle where Suzayaking had just entered. Suddenly, she smiled softly. "Hey hey hey. Identity, isn't this what it's about?" However, Sutingyu had to confirm whether Suzayaking had stayed in the banquet hall and never came out. After Suzayaking finished solving the 3 urgent problems, she came out and saw Sutingyu still there. "Mother, tell me, what kind of thief is he who is so rampant and comes to the palace to steal?" Sutingyu leaned over to talk. Suzayaking was washing her hands and casually replied, "How do I know? Anyway, it's none of our Su family's business." Yes, Sutingyu agreed, and the next second, the conversation changed. "But, mother, the culprit can't be found now. In the eyes of the queen, we are all suspects. What if we are all staying well in the banquet hall? How can we have time to commit crimes? Her Royal Highness the Queen is wise and powerful, and she will definitely not unjustly accuse people." Suzayaking thought that her daughter, who came back from the countryside, was frightened by the current battle and gave birth to a child. With a little bit of motherly heart, he comforted her. "Okay mother, then I'll feel at ease." Sutingyu smiled happily, as if she was comforted. At this moment, there is no one in this toilet. Suzayaking washed her hands and was ready to go back. Since he met his cheap daughter, he casually called out, "Come back with me." When Suzayaking was about to walk out of the bathroom door, she suddenly remembered that her cheap daughter never came back when the banquet started. Suzayaking's first reaction was not to suspect that she had fallen in love with her daughter. After all, it was she who asked Sumei to go out and walk more. It is normal for young people to have fun for a while when they come to a magnificent place like the palace for the first time. Suzayaking realized that when the guards found this out, it would be difficult to explain. "Mayor, you." Suzayaking turned around, but what greeted her was a heavy shadow and countless powders floating. Boom. Cough cough cough. Suzayaking's forehead suddenly became red and swollen. She covered her mouth and nose, but she still inhaled the gas produced by some unknown powder. Sutingyu held the meteor rod in one hand and a transparent medicine bottle in the other, which contained only half of the powder. This is also a potion refined by Sutingyu that can induce coma. However, it is not taken into the mouth, but is in powder form. The moment it comes into contact with the air, it will vaporize into gas. After being sucked in, it can produce a coma effect. The sooner or later the coma occurs, as well as the duration of the coma, depend on the amount inhaled. Sutingyu saw that Suzayaking was not dizzy yet, with a look of regret in her eyes. It's really hard to control this intensity. Before, Sutingyu had to learn how to control himself and not knock people away. Now we still have to control how not to knock people to death, but to knock them unconscious. Sutingyu was a little unfamiliar and had to hold back a lot of strength, unable to knock people out with one blow. Cough cough cough, you. Suzayaking wanted to say something else, but the medicine took effect and she could only lose consciousness and fainted to the ground. Seeing that the person was unconscious, Sutingyu dragged the person into a cubicle and closed the door. Then, Sutingyu took out a bottle of disguise potion and drank it himself, turning into Suzayaking's appearance. After finishing it, Sutingyu walked out of the toilet with a calm expression. When Sutingyu returned to the banquet hall, a new round of interrogation began. This time, it was to determine whether everyone had time to commit the crime, and guests who were not suspected could leave the palace first. After learning about the situation, Sutingyu breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, I took a step ahead and changed my identity. Otherwise, it would be unclear where Sumei went. Suzayaking had been in the banquet hall the whole time, so naturally, she was let out. As soon as he left the palace, Sutinyu made an excuse to get rid of the rest of the Su family and fled immediately. Sutinyu sneaked all the way back to the hotel she had rented on a monthly basis, locked the doors and windows of the room, and then took out the angel heart from the inventory. This heart, take it back to Lucifer when the time comes. Can he press it back on his own? Sutinyu poked the small ball of light twice. At this time, the small ball of light suddenly flashed. Huh? What's wrong? Sutinyu saw the feathers in his inventory flickering again. At the same time, Gokov Palace. The chief assistant's expression suddenly changed, a mouthful of blood spurted out, and the scepter that had been suspended in the air slowly fell to the ground. Hearing the noise, the queen outside the door opened the door and came in. What's wrong? Seeing the weakness and decline on the chief minister's face, the queen took a few steps closer, bent down to pick up the scepter, and handed it to the chief minister. Is there any result? The first assistant wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with his hand and shook his head. I just felt a trace, and then it was blocked by something. What? It means it's useless. The queen was shocked and angry. The chief assistant fell silent. Your Highness. At this time, the guard chief left and returned. The queen turned around and saw the captain of the guard had a strange look on her face. Did you find anything? The head guard quickly reported, Your Highness, during the second investigation, a guest was not in the banquet hall. After the search, it was found that she was knocked unconscious in the toilet. Wake her up and bring her here. The queen felt that this matter was not simple. What is this person's identity? Your Highness, she is SurvivalGame, director of the Bureau of Rites and Music. The chief guard carefully observed the queen's face and continued, not long ago, SurvivalGame and some of the Su family members left the palace. The queen said in a surprised tone, what are you going out of the palace for? Where does this SurvivalGame come from? Also, Director Su's daughter Sume, we searched the entire front hall and couldn't find her, the guard chief said. Look. Keep looking. Send troops to the Su family. Yes, Your Highness. The combination of various anomalies made it difficult for the queen to doubt the Su family. Let's go see the unconscious SurvivalGame first. The chief assistant stood up. Hearing this, the queen nodded gloomily. The two of them went out together. In a hotel room. Sutinyu watched the small ball of light flash for a while, then stopped. It's flashing around, it's still very energetic. Sutinyu had seen enough, and put the small ball of light back into the inventory. Sutinyu turned around and walked to the window, looking outside. From here, you can see the palace buildings. Sutinyu knew that there was a divine object there. Unfortunately, I can't get it now. Hungry. Sutinyu touched his belly. These days when she was at Su's house, she always ate the bread in the inventory. Although she was hungry, it didn't taste good. Let's go have a big meal first. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 878. Sutinyu had a comfortable sleep, and when she woke up, she felt very energetic. But yesterday night, many people in Shangjukan district had trouble sleeping and eating. When Sutinyu went out to have breakfast in the morning, he stopped by to inquire about the situation. As a result, Sutinyu went around in a circle, but did not receive any news of the theft in the palace. In all likelihood, he was suppressed. However, I must have been discovered. The Su family's memory has not been cleared. When they wake up, everything will be clear. Sutinyu analyzed it, but did not feel much worried. Sutinyu thought over it carefully from beginning to end, making sure that he had not exposed any of his identity. Now, what is more troublesome is how to get another divine object, the angel's staff. The loss of the angel's heart is likely to make the chief assistant feel wary, unless the chief assistant himself does not know that the angel's heart is lost. But the chief assistant never leaves his body with the angel's staff on weekdays, so it is not easy to get it. Although Shangjukan district seemed normal, Sutingyu turned around a few city gates and found that the guards were a bit stricter than before, and the frequency of patrols on the streets was also much more frequent. At noon, Sutingyu went to the Schwillen Hotel where he often went. "Why don't you go to Jiyang continent first, wait for the storm to pass, and then come back to get the angel's staff?" After exploring the situation all morning, if the Jiyan queen went to war, or even sealed off the city to search for the thief, then Sutingyu would feel more at ease, and even took advantage of the chaos to sneak into the chief assistant's mansion and seize the angel's staff. But now, it's too calm. Sutingyu had a bad feeling. Perhaps it is wise to leave Shangjukan district now. Volcanic Island. The bottom of the crater. Sensing the arrival of another outsider, Lucifer lazily raised his eyelids. "We meet again." Chu Xinyu stood firm with the same smile on her face. Lucifer glanced at the person who came and lowered his eyes as if he was not interested. The heart of an angel was stolen. Hearing this, Lucifer's eyes that had just been closed opened instantly. While guessing Lucifer's attitude, Chu Xinyu spoke slowly. "Just last night, the angel heart stored in the hands of the Jiyan continent's royal family was stolen by thieves. After investigation, it was found that it was not from Jiyang continent. Handwriting. Aren't you curious?" After listening, Lucifer didn't make any reaction and looked calm. Chu Xinyu tilted her head slightly. "Are you not curious, or do you have a calculated plan to know who stole the angel's heart?" "Lucifer." Chu Xinyu's voice continued, "After such a long time, it is really hard to let go of some things of faith. In a sense, your charm is so great that it is unimaginable. Nowadays, the social development direction of Yin-Yang continent is towards the level of science and technology. The backward barbaric era of belief in gods tens of thousands of years ago has disappeared without a trace. In the beginning, humans wanted to be superior to the gods, so they started war. But among all humans, there are some humans who have always adhered to their faith in gods and refused to participate in wars. When humans won, the believers of the gods were ostracized and massacred by human civilization. In the era when the gods were lost, the believers of those gods also launched no less than 1,000 awakening movements trying to resurrect the gods, but they all ended in failure. To this day, the followers of the god have been basically wiped out. However, there are no absolutes. Regarding the theft of the angel's heart, the Jiyan royal family turned their suspicions to the so-called believers of gods. But after tens of thousands of years, most of the so-called believers of gods are third-rate people who deceive people under the banner of gods, and are not worth mentioning. But there are still a small number of remnants who believe in the long-dead gods and hope that the gods will come and save the world. Chu Xinyu tried several times in succession, but Lucifer didn't respond at all, so he had to give up. Before leaving, Chu Xinyu left a message. "You should be short of this last cycle of light and darkness, and you will be completely exhausted. The last god in the world will also fall." Sutingyu stayed in Shangjukan district for another 5 days. In the past 5 days, in addition to constantly paying attention to the situation of the Jiyan royal family, Sutingyu was also inquiring about the situation in the Shaoxan mansion, and from time to time he used his transformation ability to sneak into the mansion. If you can get 2 divine items at once during this trip to Jukan district, that would be the best. Compared with the Imperial Palace, it is easier to find out internal information in the Shaoxing mansion. Before today, whenever Sutingyu had the chance, he would secretly transform into a bird and fly in at night, surveying the layout of the mansion in the dark and understanding the life patterns of the chief minister. Sutingyu's inquiries in the past few days were sometimes even right under the nose of the chief minister. Follow the chief assistant whenever possible. Indeed, the chief assistant always carries the scepter with him, even when sleeping and going to the toilet. There are a large number of strict guards near the chief assistant's dormitory and special bathroom, and they also wear thermal weapons at all times, so not even a bird can fly over. Whenever it gets close, Sutingyu can only transform into smaller and more inconspicuous reptiles, insects, etc. But the first assistant was too vigilant. If even an insect appeared within his field of vision, he would kill it directly. This bloody lesson was a wake-up call to her that her mosquito brother had spent his life. However, hard work pays off. Finally, Sutingyu found a flaw. Every midnight, the first assistant would go to the astrology tower to meditate alone, instead of going to bed first. Once you meditate, it lasts for an hour. During this time, no one was in the tower. Only the outside of the tower was guarded by heavy guards. After discovering this, Sutingyu has been relying on his deformation and invisibility abilities to try to sneak into the astrology tower. However, the Shaoxin mansion had the strictest defense against the astrology tower. Every time he came here, Sutingyu was testing it and secretly calculating the right time. On the top floor of the astrology tower, the chief minister was sitting cross-legged on the ground, meditating with his eyes closed, and at this time, the scepter would be put into a strange instrument. Sutingyu once tried throwing a small fly over. As a result, as soon as it touches the surface of the instrument, a piercing alarm will sound, with some kind of sonic attack, which can make people's ears temporarily deaf, and the instrument will open the protection. The instrument locks the scepter inside, and the bottom is connected to the floor. Locked together, unable to move even half a minute. The first assistant will immediately open his eyes. Even if it is triggered for whatever reason, the first assistant will immediately use the prophecy ability. At the beginning, Sutingyu didn't react for a while and was unprepared. When the prophecy started, he felt a palpitation in his heart. The feathers on his body suddenly glowed, and then, the chief assistant's prophecy seemed to have failed. The feeling of heart palpitations gradually disappeared. Several times after that, Sutingyu always brought feathers with him whenever he entered the Shaoxin mansion. Noon. Sutingyu came to Shwilan restaurant to cook as usual. While waiting for the food to be served, Sutingyu tapped her fingers on the table in boredom, thinking to herself, "I'll try again in the next few days to see if I can get the scepter." Sutingyu actually wanted to get the scepter quietly without alerting the chief assistant. But now, time and time again, they have failed. Have you heard? The chief minister is holding a banquet and invites the young talents who have passed the final scientific examination this year to his residence. When did it happen? Why didn't I know? The news I just inquired about has not been released by the chief minister's office. This news was told to me by a friend of mine. Is it credible? If you don't believe it, just wait a day or two and you'll find out. Sutingyu's expression paused. Banquet. Or from the Shaofa family. After the food was served, Sutingyu ate the food while listening to the conversations of the guests around him. Then those attending the banquet are all young talents. That's not necessarily the case. Some high-ranking officials will go there, so you should get familiar with them in advance. Yes, after passing the final examination, I have almost half a foot in the officialdom. Sutingyu ate the food calmly. It's so delicious. I haven't gotten tired of it after eating it for so long. Banquet. Hee hee. What a coincidence. The thief who stole the angel's heart has not been found yet. Now the chief assistant holding the angel's staff has not taken any precautions, but he is going to hold a banquet. Tisk tisk. Sutingyu thought about the worst. Maybe, this is still a hangman banquet. He was waiting for a little thief who stole a divine item to come to the door of the Shaoxin mansion. How considerate! I was afraid that thieves would not be able to get in, so I invited people who were not officials to come in for the banquet. Sutingyu smiled inwardly. I was rushing to give her the divine item. If I didn't go on this trip and get the divine item, it would really be a waste of this good intention. After eating and drinking, Sutingyu left Shwilan Hotel. Sutingyu waited for a long time, and finally the official news came out from the Shaoxing mansion that a banquet would be held in 3 days, and the venue would be the Shaogong mansion. After getting the accurate information, Su Tingyu returned to the hotel with confidence. At this time, Shofa mansion, study room. The first assistant was playing with the goldfish in the fish tank, and when he heard footsteps coming in, he asked without looking back, "How are you doing?" "My lord, the news has spread," the visitor, wearing the servant's uniform of the chief minister's mansion, replied respectfully with his head lowered. Yes, the chief assistant waved his hand and motioned for his men to go out. After the person left, the chief assistant's eyes fell on the scepter beside him, his eyes bright and dim. 2 days later, Su Tingyu walked out of the hotel and went for a walk on the street, eating snacks along the way. This is good, and it's okay. After eating, Su Tingyu finished the last supper in his hand, and at 11:30 in the evening, he arrived outside the Shofa mansion. Su Tingyu glanced at the Prime Minister's mansion, took out a tissue, touched his mouth, then found a trash can on the street and threw it in. Tomorrow, it's time for the banquet to begin. But Su Tingyu didn't plan to go on time, but came in advance. The first assistant mansion is going to hold a banquet, and the servants in the mansion must be prepared. We are all nervous about tomorrow, but what about tonight? There is no energy shield in the Shaoxian mansion. Su Tingyu left on the spot and came to the safe corner that she had explored many times. She skillfully used her transformation ability to become the little bird fluttered its wings and flew into the Shaoxing mansion. Quick, move the things over here, just leave them. Tap, tap, tap. Don't break it, I won't be able to afford the compensation even if I sell you. An arrogant housekeeper instructs a group of plain-looking and thick-set men to carry various items. In Jian continent, if a man is not good-looking, he can only engage in lower-level labor, and he has no human rights. Even eating becomes a problem. Because if you become a pet, you don't have to do hard work and you can have enough to eat. After all, you have to cater to your owner at certain times. Su Tingyu flew low, using the night and various buildings as cover. Su Tingyu arrived near the astrology tower with a clear goal based on what he had found out earlier. It's not yet midnight, and the chief assistant is not inside yet. Su Tingyu was in no hurry to go in, because before 0 o'clock, the astrology tower would be searched inside and out by many guards. Su Tingyu had gone in early once before, but because the search was so intense that not even a small insect was spared, she was almost exposed. Su Tingyu waited quietly outside. When midnight was approaching, the guards entered the tower on time to search. 1 minute before midnight, Su Tingyu saw the figure of the chief assistant. The latter had the air of a powerful minister, walked calmly, and held the angel's staff. At 0 o'clock, the first assistant just stepped into the astrological tower. The guards outside also became alert. Su Tingyu checked the information on the astrology tower. For Jian continent, the astrology tower was as significant as the imperial palace. As the chief minister of a country, he is good at the art of prophecy. He enters the astrological tower every day to divine the fate and development trend of the entire Jian continent. This is not only a personal matter for the chief minister, but also affects the entire Jian continent. Major events in Yin continent. Su Tingyu was a little shocked when he first learned about it. Human beings in this world do not believe in gods and dared to kill gods tens of thousands of years ago. But human beings covet the powerful power of gods. If in the beginning, they tried to dig out the hearts of gods in order to fight against gods, then later on, Su Tingyu didn't believe it and was not driven by any desire. But now, the gods are almost extinct, and we are in a technological society, where science should be the first force. However, from ancient times to the present, humans in the Jian continent have inherited some special abilities. Here in the Jian continent, an astrological tower has also been built, hoping to rely on prophecy to avoid disasters. In a sense, this is no different than a god. Humans killed gods tens of thousands of years ago and became new gods tens of thousands of years later. It's like a rotation. Seeing that it was almost done, Sutingyu also started to sneak in. Sutingyu first became invisible, then transformed into a small lizard and crawled all the way over. It took more than 10 minutes for Sutingyu to finally touch the wall of the astrology tower. The door of the astrology tower was locked, and there was almost no gap for Sutingyu to get in. Only a few small windows on the tower could allow him to get in.